Hi, and welcome to the OrgDev podcast. So what can organisation development learn from learning and development? How can we transfer insights from high-performing individuals and teams in other fields like Formula One into our own organisations? And how can L&D and OD work together to achieve greater impact? Today, we dive into these questions with leading learning and development thinker David Hayden. Together, we'll explore the science of learning and performance and how it can drive organisation success, and also understand what OD practitioners might be missing. David is an accomplished author of books including Adjacent Learning and Learning and Development in the Workplace, and he also leads the consultancy Talent Delivers, where he works with individuals and companies to define their L&D direction and content. David is passionate about the impact and transfer of learning in the workplace, and he's had a fascinating career, including shaping the learning offer of the Chartered Institute of Personal Development to its 150,000 members. His extensive experience is underpinned by academic qualifications, including 2 masters. One was enough for me. And he's a chartered fellow of the CIPD. And he's a man after my own heart with a passion for distance running. And this year he completed the London Marathon in a really decent time as well. So welcome, David. We're absolutely delighted to have you join us today.
So welcome. Lovely to have you with us. So just to kick us off, just tell us a bit about the work you're doing.
As you heard there, I work freelance with my company Talent Delivers, and as we record this, it's been a year that I've been in this world. So it's been quite an interesting year, very different, finding the rhythm of the work. But I've been doing a lot of delivery around organisation design and development. So lots of practitioners who are looking to understand more about those 2 fields, who are looking to get into those two areas, so it's part of their career development, or just they're working closer with organisation design and development specialists, so they're wanting to know more about the colleagues that they're working with. So that's been a big part of my year this year. But I also kind of am associate for a couple of other companies as well. So I get to interact with some amazing individuals, see their realities. And what I'm really excited about in terms of next year, how this morphs next year, I'm taking up one of the board director posts for the Learning Network. So start a 2-year tenure on that. Really excited by that.
So when we talk about L&D and OD, that sometimes there's an overlap. How do you differentiate the two? What's your definition of L&D versus?
So I think in terms of the way I come to terms with it is learning and development can tend to have a much narrower focus. So thinking around specifics of organisation performance. So learning and development will sit under an umbrella of organisation development. So it'd be a strand of it. So it may just concentrate on a significant part, whether that be leadership capability, for instance, may be a priority for learning and development, or whether it be the skills agenda, which a lot of the research at the minute is saying learning and development are really focusing heavy on the skills agenda. So it's a much narrower, more defined field. However, that's not to say some learning functions are really kind of starting to expand. I know a number of rename themselves learning and organisation development, so really kind of embracing that wider field of organisation development in their offering.
Yeah. And what do people get wrong when they think about learning and development? Because some people have quite a narrow view of it, just kind of training.
There's like a 1980s view, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so substituting the word training for learning and still delivering a catalogue of training courses, that's not a learning and development function. It's a training function, primarily throwing content at people and hoping that some of that content sticks. So I think that's one of the things where people get a wrong impression of learning and development. It is more than delivering training. It's looking more holistic at the individuals and the performance needed for the organisation.
The subject of your book, Adjacent Learning, positioned over your left shoulder there, which is a really good read, is really intriguing. Can you explain what it means and how insights from outside the business world can transform workplace learning as well? So there's some really great examples in there, aren't there?
Thank you. Yeah. So the premise is really, really basic in the fact that as employees, we are more than our job description. But very, very quickly in organizations, we become our job description very, very quickly. So a lot of decisions are made based on the job description rather than the person. But when you get talking to people and hearing their stories, there's a wealth of things people do outside of the world of work that actually contributes to them as a whole, as their being at work. So we've got in the book about 50 people who Steve George, who co-authored, who we asked, say, look, what is it you do outside of work that makes you a better person at work? You bring some of those things to work. And it was a very loose, brief remit we gave them, but we got some amazing stories back. And we got stories from people who were run directors at Park Run and managing different teams of volunteers every week, but their job role in their organization was relatively junior. You got people who were kind of running committees. So one of the stories in there, Sarah, she was a forklift operative in a warehouse, but helped run a mums, bumps and babies, it was called, community event forum, putting events on and things like that to help new mums. You had someone else kind of working through again a similar thing, working through women with going through the menopause, and especially younger women going through the menopause as well. So all these things people do outside of work, kind of how we can harness those skills to help drive the skills gap within organizations. So rather than just thinking, oh, right, okay, we need to put a training course on this skill, what skills have we already got in the organization? And so, yeah, it was an opportunity to really explore what is it we could do. So Steve and I, we created a framework. So what is it we could do to help learning and development and individuals to explore the skills beyond the world of work?
One of the things I saw you mention in a video online was about how Great Ormond Street Hospital had sort of taken tips from Formula One teams to do pit stops, about how they could try. How does that happen? Because a lot of organisations do look externally, don't they? The classic example we sort of see is where someone's seen a design somewhere else and thought it will work here. You can see principles, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will work in your organisation. You talk about a filter, don't you? So what is that process, and what was the example about Ormond Street?
Right. So yeah, absolutely. So so if you the bit about Formula One is where the race is won or lost on things like wheel change and fueling, those kind of things, the pit stop element. And Formula One, so Great Ormond Street, we're looking at, right, how can we streamline some of our processes? How can we make things work fast? Because we need to make sure that we can deliver for our patients faster. So it was around what they did was they took a step back and explored not only what they wanted to do, but where could they learn lessons from. So if you think about the coming into the pit stop, if you think about the team working together, if you think about the everyone's got their own unique role, if you think about there's trust in everyone having their place. So everyone was in Formula One, everyone's lined up, they're all ready to go. There's trust in that team. There's trust that person next to them can do their job. And so it was breaking down those things. So if you think around in a theatre, in an operating theatre, having that same kind of ethos and belief and drive for teamwork. So it's not like get someone in, see if you can whip someone's kind of kidneys out very, very quickly and then stitch them back up and put them out. But it's around that kind of, where's the sense of urgency? Where have we got the gaps, and where can we mirror those examples and apply them here? So that the filter stage in the model is all around taking that step back, not looking at it at face value, but taking it a step back and saying, what is happening here? What has led to someone being able to do it in 3 seconds, someone being able to do it in 7 seconds? What is the difference in some of those things?
So for OD practitioners that are listening today, what's one small yet impactful step they can take today to begin applying insights from the outside world?
Given a big part of organisation development is the humanistic element, given that it's around, there's a big piece around skills, leadership skills, employee skills. I think it is that. So stories are a big part of organisation development as well. So taking that a stage further and really kind of going beyond the boundaries of the organisation to think around what stories have people got, what's their experience, what is it people have experienced before. So one of the challenges, I worked for one organisation and they went through a huge organisational change virtually every year, and went on lots of sessions with people who would have organisation development job titles today. And I sat through a number of sessions where I'd be told about the change. I'd be told about the reasons for the change, and I'd be told that kind of as an individual I would experience certain emotions, and I saw the Kubler-Ross curve so many times in the 90s, and being told I would weave my way through that. And at one point I do remember saying, I'm actually feeling quite energized by this change. There's some really good stuff coming out of this. So that opportunity to allow people to share their stories, share their experience around organisation change, not just in the organisation they're in, but what's gone on beyond that current piece of employment. I think if we can harness more stories like that, I think more people will feel that they're communicated with as opposed to communicated at and to.
I think that's a lovely example, isn't it? Just being really aware of our own mental models about stuff. So if our mental model is that change is scary and so we'd be afraid, that's how we might position it to the people that we're talking to. If we think change is exciting, we do it in a similar way. So I think practitioners in either L&D or OD,
absolutely,
kind of being aware of that's really important.
And especially sort of like, kind of the fact that so many organisations are going through a constant change. So we get through one change and then we go to another and then we go to another. It's not like the kind of 5-10 years gap between them. So employees will be used to change interventions in organisations, and so let's hear their stories and maybe learn from our employees where it might have gone really well in another organisation.
Kubler-Ross is a really good example of those frameworks or those models that just kind of stick around and just become kind of. What are the other ones that for you, kind of in your world, that keep cropping up?
I'm not the world's biggest fan of Maslow. I have to admit, when I first came across it, it was like one of those things. Oh yeah, this makes so much sense. But then I did some research on him for one of my masters, and it was like finding out about his childhood and his story, and it's like, okay, so I got some doubts in my mind. Was it his research or was it his experience? He was talking about that, and then I found somewhere else he didn't create the pyramid, and then heard David Rock talk about actually kind of physical pain and mental pain are kind of the same thing. So he said Maslow got it wrong, and I remember shouting at that podcast, going, "Yes, I thought so." Kind of that kind of thing. Maslow, I'm always intrigued when Maslow pops in a leadership development course, and so why is it there? What are people going to do with that? Is it there because it's always been there, or is a facilitator going to allow a conversation around this is how we can practically use Maslow? That kind of thing. So yeah, Maslow is one that I kind of like question. I have got a favourite go-to one, which been around. It's been around since the 40s, but I just love both its simplicity, but also how it changes with every situation, and that's Lewin's force field analysis. When I first came across that, I was just like, whoa, this makes so much sense. And then I saw it kind of turned around, so it's like the equilibrium bit was sort of like vertically aligned vertically rather than horizontally. And that was like, whoa, this makes it even more accessible. Yeah. So
And I guess as practitioners, we have a responsibility, don't we? Because we're shaping people's worlds, like how they see the world. So, it doesn't take much research to look into some of these models to say there's not a lot of empirical evidence that supports it, is there? Yeah, we can easily propose them to, a group of people that don't necessarily think about this kind of world very much. So we're one of the main inputs into their world about how they see a thing.
Yeah.
And we're not on solid ground. It's not necessarily true. It's more like a heuristic, kind of feels right.
Yeah.
Therefore it should be right as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And especially if the person sharing it is quite charismatic, and there's one particular model I'm thinking of, and so like really engaging, really kind of sold and really good story. And like years later, it's like, God, that model is just like, there's no basis in that model whatsoever. It's that one where 7% of what we hear and 20% of what we speak. That one part. Yeah.
Oh, is it Morabian?
Yeah, that's just yeah. I didn't want to say that. But yeah, but I can remember the day I was first introduced to that, and who was doing it, and where, and what he drew on the flip chart as well. It's really compelling, a really compelling way to get a message across. It's just not a correct message.
You've done a lot of the setting up of the L&D inputs for the CIPD, and the CIPD prides itself on being evidence-based. That's a huge responsibility, isn't it, to be sort of shaping the programs around things like situational leadership and what's your process for choosing what goes in, and because that must be really hard, mustn't it?
So I was responsible for the portfolios around learning and development and organisation design and development. And it was so the people we worked with, the people we commissioned, been really kind of targeted about who those people were, in terms of thinking around their credibility, their research they've done, the kind of their ongoing commitment to their own self-development. So where they were sharing, where they'd learned stuff as well. So there are a few factors around how we identified people to work with, and also kind of what that meant for, my own development in terms of keeping up to date, reading stuff, reading the research. Yeah, kind of looking for, you read a piece of research and you're looking for holes in it all the time. It's like, well, is this right? How do we know this? Kind of, how do we know that to be true? Where's the data to back this up? So yeah, so lots of questions as you were reading things to make sure. And, we did have to say a few times to people who we were asking to come on, and so we videoed a few people, and we had to say a few times, look, I know you're a big fan of this, but please don't mention it. That kind of thing. And I remember having one very interesting conversation with someone who's extremely well respected, extremely well known. And it's like, I really love this piece of work, what you're doing, and we're really excited about what this could do, and love the research around that. So can you talk about that and not this? And that was quite a moment.
So one of the things we wanted to talk to you about was kind of the interplay of L&D and OD, and how the two kind of fields can work together more cohesively. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's lots of scope and lots of opportunity for data and insights to cross between the two disciplines. So if you think about learning and development, you've got the traditional learning cycle of needs analysis, design, delivery, and evaluation as the four areas of the circle. And I think there's some elements of that learning and development do where they do it really, really well, that organisation development can benefit and embrace. So from a design point of view, for instance, there's lots of options in the design element, and this is one of the distinctions, I think, between a training function and a learning function. So a training function will default to put a training course on. A learning function will look at, kind of, okay, there's a need here. What are the options we've got? So in the design phase, they'll look at, could we do it might be a podcast, it might be an infographic, it might be a small piece of e-learning, or it might actually need a bit more of a formal course wraparound on it, or there might be a blend of those solutions. So I think in terms of where organisation development has got to put some interventions on with the employees, then partnering up with learning and development to find out what options are available at the design phase could work really, really well. And also the concept of not throwing content at people, but actually thinking around how we can have a meaningful two-way dialogue where individuals do feel that they're involved in the process. Design is definitely one area where we can help our organisation development colleagues. Another area is in the evaluation process. So evaluation, obviously, a big part of organisation development, as kind of reflect on the success or otherwise of any intervention. One of the things that I've noticed in my career in learning development as a trainer, and then as an L&D consultant, and then undertaking lots of facilitation. In a training course, in a learning event, employees tell you stuff. They tell you their reality. They tell you that they can be brutally honest and say, this won't work. Who dreamt this up? This will never work in a month as Sundays. Or, kind of, it's like, right, I came in here and I wasn't quite sure, but I get it now. However, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. There's a wonderful lady, Dr. Ina Weinbauer Heidel, who's done some work on the impact, 12 levers of learning impact. So she talks around in a training event, asking the employees, what is the likelihood of them transferring this learning into the workplace? And those insights, I think those insights, that honesty that you get from employees is really useful data and really useful insights that can be worked upon in any kind of organisation development program. So yeah, just how we can harness that. Not saying, Fred over there said this and I over there said that, none of that. But these are the things that are going on, in relation to this subject. There's also an opportunity to help co-create the evaluation stage of the OD intervention. So things like Brinkhoff success case study. So the organisations what use Brinkhoff success case study method, they can really help OD practitioners with that. And models like Thalheimer's 8 levels. So going beyond, so lots of learning development practitioners will say, yeah, we use Kirkpatrick. It's questionable whether they use all of Kirkpatrick, but Thalheimer takes Kirkpatrick to another level and talks around where there's really impactful opportunities to transfer that learning, transfer those skills, transfer that behaviour back into the workplace. So I think there's some opportunity and synergy there.
What advice have you got? So if you've got an organisation where L&D and OD are quite siloed and they're not kind of integrated, what advice would you give to an organisation that wants to integrate them more? Where would you start?
Both formally and informally. Yeah. So encourage people to talk to each other. Encourage people to share experiences. Yeah, I'd encourage it both formally and informally. So getting them together in a room or on screen. But also encourage the relationship building informally. After all, they should have a common purpose in their organisation. In terms of driving organisation performance through its people, there should be that common purpose. How can we come together to deliver what we've got to deliver? One of my favourite scenes in a film is in Apollo 13. So where you've got you've got the bit where they realise the filter doesn't work. It's fitting a square peg into a round hole. They get a group of people together and say, look, we've got to fit this into this with this, and then tell them what it is. And that it's that kind of mentality to break down silos. It's look, kind of together collectively, we've got to do what we need for the organisation with the tools we've got. What can we do? And in Apollo 13, you get someone there saying, right, we're going to need coffee, and puts the coffee on. And then you get someone going, it wasn't meant for this. And he's like, well, no, it wasn't, but this is the reality we're facing today. So let's get on with it. Yeah. So having that kind of a Apollo 13 approach, we're all in this together. Let's do something together.
And so some HR teams are horribly siloed, aren't they? But the organisation doesn't care. You know what I mean? It's like, whether you're pay and reward or whether you're the generalist or whatever, it's like it's about offering a seamless service as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just the other thing I'd say to that, if you're listening to this or watching this and you are siloed, but there isn't anyone kind of taking a lead on that, then go underground a little bit and start exploring. Making those links yourself, and you'll be amazed how many people might follow you.
So with OD, often one of the methods of intervention are things like the workshop, because it is a way to convene people together. And OD often opens up a new type of space for people to talk in a different way. So it'll be able to transcend hierarchy or laterally bring two different teams together. And it's a new type of talk in that particular moment. And it's often feels quite cathartic for the people in there because people are able to talk in a new way. But then we go back to the BAU, back to our places, and people feel good about what happened, but it doesn't operationalize the change. And we have to get into the habits and the rituals and the disciplines of that. What can L&D sort of teach OD? Because sometimes OD can get caught a little bit on the showmanship of the wonderful event, but not the really important bit afterwards.
That's a really good question. It's the only point for learning and development as well. I think there's a number of things that need to happen around it. So where the interventions are one-off, and especially if it's done where people are coming in. So you might have a team of you might be managing a team of 10, 15 people, and your 10, 15 people go to interventions spread over the course of a month, say. Yeah. So they're not having the information at the same time. So they're going back into the routine, the normal, and that makes it much harder for someone to come back, especially if it's hard enough for someone to come back into a team if they're really bouncy, saying, hey, I've had this really great session. It's really good. It's going to be amazing. There's going to be some great stuff. And they're faced with a load of people going, what do you mean it's going to be great? Convince me. I'm not seeing that.
Oh, he's had training.
That's it. Yeah, he's had training. So if you're an extrovert and you're facing challenges like that, imagine what it's like if you're an introvert and coming back to the team and there's no way I can do any of that. I'm going to keep my mouth shut and carry on. So I think there's something around how teams are kind of put through, for want of a better phrase, put through the interventions. Are they done collectively? And how is the manager engaged in that process as well? So very often the manager gets a bad rap, kind of lots of things. Oh, if only those pesky managers would do this. But actually, how do we engage with the managers? And that goes back to the leadership and management training we do with them. Do we actually give them enough space and time to explore that development side of their team, or the way they can put a comms message together to support the business, or the way they can deal with someone who's dissenting for where the organisation's going?
What's really catching your attention in the field at the moment? What's exciting you about the future of?
So I had a buzzing conversation with someone in my network last week. He's got a big project on working on the skills agenda, looking at kind of the skills within different functions, and he's using artificial intelligence to do a lot of the legwork, and said, I mean, it's a big project, but it's an incredible amount of time is saved through using AI for that. And it's like, wow, yeah, tell me more about this. But yeah, it's sort of like using AI, asking AI to come up with some templates and frameworks, and then checking them. Actually, no, that's not quite right. So here's some more criteria that you need to consider AI, and then taking that back to his stakeholders. The stakeholders going, wow, this is brilliant. This is what we need. How do we do that? Then using AI to help populate what would an ideal scenario look like. So a lot of the legwork in terms of interviewing lots of people around specific skills of what they're needed. He's just gone straight to AI to do a trawl of, if it's purchasing, let's look at the purchasing profession and see what the purchasing profession has seen, and using AI to trawl that to come back to then say, is this the standard you want to move purchasing forward in this organization? So so that can be massively exciting for any OD intervention. We're kind of looking at the range of skills needed for now and the future, how AI can really help with that.
I think it's fair to say not everybody's excited about AI in this space.
They're certainly feeling quite threatened, aren't
they? Yeah, absolutely. But it's like, my view of AI is look, if we can use AI to free up the talent we've got in our organizations to do what we recruited them to do, rather than getting bogged down in lots of things that we didn't recruit them to do but are necessary to do the job, then let's use AI to do that. Let's use AI to, because if AI wasn't there, what this guy would have had to do was to search through the purchasing, all the purchasing professional bodies, look at what are the common standards, and then start writing them, typing them, physically doing that. But he got AI to do that in half an hour. So freed up the time. What's the most important bit of that of the work he was doing there? Agreeing the standards with the stakeholder. So it got to the stakeholder a lot quicker. The conversation had with the stakeholder was a lot more insightful than he said it might have been if he'd just kind of done his own bit of research, because he didn't know what he didn't know. So it's got the power to do some amazing things. We just need to be confident to experiment with it and not worry that it's going to take away from us, but where can we add to it?
Yeah, and sometimes the things that maybe hold us back are because we wouldn't know what to do if we had the time.
Yes.
That kind of nebulous stuff. I'm interested in your view as well, because over the last 20 years, one of the things that's continued to surprise me, like there's loads of examples of good practice, but an example I see quite a lot is where you have the organization strategy, and then you have the L&D thing kind of over here, but not necessarily connected to or informing of. And there's often a disconnect between the strategy of the organization, where we need to be, what capabilities we need to develop, and the role of L&D actually saying as is, well, this is where we are, that's fine, these are the gaps you've got to fill, and this is how we're going to do it. What is your hypothesis about why that happens? And is it something that you see a lot?
Yeah, so there is... It boils down to what is the philosophical stance of learning in an organization. So is it about education, or is it about organization performance? So in those organizations where it's about education, you will see statements in the learning strategy like, we want everyone to be the best they can be. We have to ask ourselves, is that right for the organization performance? Everyone being the best they can be is on the surface a wonderful ambition, but actually, first of all, can we achieve that? Secondly, do people want to be the best they can be? Because sometimes people are like, no, do you know what? I'm at an age and a stage where I want to make sure I do enough to get my wage at the end of the month, and I could do more. But right now, I don't want to do more. I haven't got that capacity to dive into that. Whereas we've got a learning strategy. No, you can be so much more than this. You can do. But actually, learning development needs to be there to enable people to perform how the organisation needs them to. And then, in terms of that statement around we want people to be the best they can be, very often it'll have things like, oh yes, and access to external education. So, but what's the reality that people can access that external education? I've been lucky a few times in my career where I've been supported by my employer to do a qualification, but there have been periods of my employment where I've not been able to access that, and been told either there's not enough funding or it's not job critical. And I said, well, it didn't say job critical in the strategy. You know, in the policy, it said, you know, kind of, you know, give us a business case why, and I've given you a business case. You know, what do you mean you've run out of money? It doesn't say we've only got 10 grand and that's 2 courses out the way. You know, so can people actually access the things that are written in the strategy? So, I think there's a disconnect, but it all boils down to what is the belief system of what learning and development is for in an organisation.
Really important.
Yeah,
it's not a conversation that's had kind of or articulated very often,
because it's something that we've done for years and years and years, and it, you know, kind of the term learning is something we all do. You know, we've done it ever since, well, at least the day we were born, and there's a lot of theory to say we learn before we're born. You know, so it's like, yeah, we all know what learning is. So there's that little barrier that we've got to, you know, we've got to try and get across. Yeah, that's learning, workplace learning. However, we need to consider this, and this.
What do you enjoy most about the work you do? What really excites you?
What really excites me? Talking learning and development there, kind of thing. No, what really excites me is when you get into when you start exploring other people's reality, and then start exploring possibilities from that. Yeah, I do get a real buzz from exploring with people around where their possibilities could go, and in terms of whether that be through coaching, whether that be through mentoring, whether that be through being asked for advice. But yeah, just that sense of where can we go from here.
I know when we spoke in the pre-call for this, you talked about train the trainer and how that's kind of getting into. And
in terms of a train the trainer, kind of love working on any project where I'm asked to help on a train the trainer project. That whole, you know, kind of looking, you know, beyond that word trainer, it kind of helping people to see the realms of possibility. I was with one group of people and talking about digital opportunities for delivering a message, and there was a couple of people that were sat next to each other, and they were both sat there, arms folded, all through the morning, and they did some very practical things. You know, they did some very, very practical things, and you know, they're saying, "You telling me that, you know, kind of you can replace me by putting a piece of e-learning on?" And it's like, no. So it's like, you know, when you're with that person, you know, so imagine imagine it's a set of driving instructors, for example. Yeah, so this is kind of closest I can give without naming the organisation. But it's like, as a driving instructor, is the learner driving the car all the time, or are you parked up somewhere talking to the person and explaining some stuff? And the guys went the equivalent of, yeah, we are. So, right, and what does the employee want most? Well, in a driving instructor example, they want to be driving the most. Yeah, right, okay. What if the time you're with them, they could be driving all the time, but beforehand, you give them an infographic, you give them a podcast, you give them maybe a piece of e-learning, maybe not, but something. So some of that stuff you're constantly talking around can be done there, and that frees you up for that other person to be driving all the time. And then suddenly you saw their arms unfold, and they kind of looked at each other and went, oh, like that. And so I love those moments where you can help people see another way through a problem that they've got and they're facing. So yeah, and train the trainer is one avenue of that.
Obviously, you've had a really fascinating career working in some really interesting context and helping organizations work out some really difficult challenges. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way?
So some of the biggest lessons, when someone says, don't open that can of worms, I learnt the hard way, not to say, oh, okay, but to say, tell me a bit more about that can of worms, because actually, you know, whatever I do, if we don't address that can of worms, anything you work on is not going to be a success. And, if your name's attached to it, then, yeah, cause it's like, well, we could have told you this won't work because of this, it's like, okay. Yeah. So when anyone says that phrase or phrases like that, yeah, don't go down there. Don't go down that cul-de-sac. It's like, no, come on, tell me a bit more. Another one was, don't let other people project their views onto you. So I used to have quite a commute. So I live in Doncaster, and when I worked for the CIPD, my desk was in Wimbledon. And actually, there are times where I miss my commute because I could do all sorts of stuff on that commute, and I really, I really valued that time. It was a bit of time for me, and actually, that commute got me back into running. So yeah, but loads of people would say, "Oh, you must hate it," "Oh, well, how do you get here so early? You must get, don't you sleep?" kind of thing. But yeah, they would project their views of their commute, especially because they were like, in a 2-carriage train all the way from Brighton into London. Then yeah, it was horrendous for them, but it wasn't for me. So yeah, don't let other people project their views onto you. Be up for saying, no, actually, that's not my reality.
How do you kind of invest in your own learning and development? What does that look like for you at the moment?
I am buzzing that I can answer that question, where I know some of my peers would be going, oh well. So there's a few things. I thought I was really good at learning habits, but I was on a podcast about 18 months ago with Sarah Nichol, who wrote a book called Learning Habits, and I was blown away by some of the stuff in there. It's like, oh wow, I've never thought that. And one of the things she says that I've worked into my rhythm is, she said, don't start your morning opening your emails. She said that just, especially if it's like a sense of dread, start your morning learning something. So I've worked really hard to put that into my rhythm. So yeah, it may be watching a short video on a particular thing in PowerPoint to learn more about PowerPoint, for instance. It may be listening to a podcast. It may be reading a blog post on LinkedIn, that kind of thing. But I always do something that has a learning edge to it before I open my emails. So it just puts the mind in a different state. So yeah, so that's one habit I've embraced from being exposed to Sarah Nichol and learning habits. The other is reflection, and I know this is a big piece. What I've loved about working with all the people I've come across in organisation development is the strength of reflecting and reflective and reflexive practice, and taking that time out to reflect. I was did some work with Professor Tony Wall over 18 months ago now. And the really great group of organisation development practitioners in the room, and I was really kind of honoured and humbled to be in the room with them. But one of the things that someone said there in terms of doing reflection and reflective practice was, consider how you can handwrite your reflections rather than going straight to typing, and that was a big win for me out of those few days. Just handwriting some of my reflections, which then reinvests. Oh, actually, I need to explore this. So that reinvests in the learning. So yeah, I've done some big programs as you mentioned right in the introductions, but also kind of those little regular rhythms to make sure that I can stay up to date and current in my practice.
Do you want to ask what about recommendation?
Yeah, we always like to ask, is there a particular book or a podcast or something else you'd recommend to others?
There's Learning Development Practice, the 5th edition, coming up November 2025 as well. So, so look, I mentioned Apollo 13 earlier on. So, and there's lots of examples in adjacent learning around film and theatre, what we can learn, from that. So, there's kind of a couple of things. I've mentioned Apollo 13, but also Hidden Figures. So if you think about the leadership lessons from both Apollo 13 and Hidden Figures, there's lots and lots of leadership lessons we can take from there. There's a wonderful quote by the character Gene Kranz, played by Ed Harris, who, when they're talking around just before the just before Apollo 13 comes back into the Earth's atmosphere, someone saying this could be our biggest disaster, and Gene Kranz says, with all due respect, sir, I think this could be our finest hour. And so that reframing and using films to think around how we can reframe things and how we can embrace leadership lessons. So there's a wonderful scene in Hidden Figures where the manager says to the character, "Where do you disappear to?" And she said, kind of the bathroom that I can use is so far away. And he decks a sledgehammer to the white-only bathroom sign. Just that sense of, kind of leadership in action and leading from the front. So, yeah, those two films as great leadership examples. More, I guess, more down to the practice of learning and development. Yeah, I'm a massive fan of the Mind Tools podcast. They've just done a bit of a cringy Christmas edition, which is quite funny, but a little bit cringy, but quite funny. But what I love about the Mind Tools podcast, and I think this is something we can all share wider, is they explore a topic each week for about 30 minutes on linked to learning and performance. But then at the end of it, they have this, what have I learned this week? So they have a regular conversation about stuff they've learned, and it can be work related, non-work related, learning related, non-learning related, although everything is learned. And I'm a massive advocate of that. Just let's talk about learning. Let's talk about what we've learned. And if organizations want a learning culture, well, they've already got a learning culture. It just may not be the one they want. But if organizations want a positive learning culture, then embracing that Mind Tools question, what have I learned this week, can work wonders. If we introduce it into team meetings, if we introduce it into any session we've got with employees in front of us, what have we learned this week? And just really embracing the fact that people have learned, not judging what they've learned. That's the important thing. Once you start judging, oh, you did what? You didn't know that. Once you start judging that, then that's going to turn the culture you want into the opposite direction.
What advice would you give someone considering a career in organisation development? So they may be at the foothills of their career, they may be consider it as an option. There may be an L&D person who's frustrated, going, there must be another way.
There must be another way. Yeah. So there's three things I would say. There's three things I would say. Don't be put off by the varying definitions and the models out there. And don't go in with that attitude. It's all theoretically heavy. Find a model that you can connect with and use it as a starting framework. So, kind of in terms of, there is a lot written about organisation development. There's a huge amount, but start small, but start somewhere. Don't be put off by the vast array of stuff and all the different definitions that we've got. The second thing, and this is where a model really, really helped me. It's the McKinsey 7S model. What really helped me do this is the McKinsey 7S model for me allowed me to ask lots of questions against each of those 7 S's. It allowed me to ask loads of questions, and I was able to answer a lot of those questions as well. But what I then had a conversation with someone, and she said, "How do you know that to be true?" And that was like a big moment for me. So anyone new coming into it, have that question in your head all the time. How do we know this to be true? And so really kind of keep asking that, because you'll unearth some wonderful, wonderful insights and data just by how do we know this to be true. So you use that question. And the third thing, and kind of alluded to it a couple of times in the conversation, dive into some of the stuff about use of self as instrument of change. So thinking about your own role, what are the biases and attitudes you bring? What are the stories you tell about managers, about certain groups of employees, about how a policy is or isn't adhered to? What stories do you tell around that? And then kind of look at use of self as instrument of change and thinking, am I positively impacting on this change, or am I negatively impacting on this approach? That's really powerful for me. So yeah, they're the three things.
Brilliant. Really practical advice. And just want to say a huge thank you. It's been a really, really fascinating conversation. You can definitely see the ways in which L&D can complement the practice of OD. And it feels like there's a whole wealth of resources out there as well. If people want to follow your work, you are an author, you are busy writing at the moment. We'd love to know more about your secrets of how you do it. What's the best way for people to follow your work? And also just to keep up to date with the latest books. You do a lot of work for Kogan Page, don't you? Who want to sort of make
So I've got an author page on Kogan Page. Find me on LinkedIn. Currently I'm posting something every day from 1st of December to 24th of December 2024. Obviously kind of that will have happened, but you can find that on the hashtag LD Advent or david@talentdelivers.co.uk.
It's been a great conversation. Danny, what are you taking away from it?
It's a really long list of things I'm taking away, and I've got loads. It's sparked loads of ideas, which I've been scribbling down. But I think some of the key things are being really discerning about the models and frameworks we introduce people to, and just holding those very lightly and carefully. What you said about seeing people as more than just their roles, and really being aware of who people that are working with us are and what they can bring in from outside. I love the Apollo 13 approach as well. Kind of, we're in this together. Kind of put your silos to one side and just focus on the thing we're trying to sort and work together.
I think we've been tough on Maz, though. I woke up today feeling very self-actualized. I'd gone up through the levels and I was right there. Dear to all those things, actually. And there's a couple of things you just said, and right at the very end, which has really stuck with me. And I think this deserves more explanation, which is all organisations have a learning culture. It just might not be the one that they want. And I think that's really important. That's just such an important question to think. What is it? What do we do? Because we just hear, it's safe to fail. That overly tired rhetoric, isn't it? But is it? And do we take the time because we're so busy to actually take the learnings from it? Or do we just keep rinsing and repeating over and over again as well? The other thing I want to do some more exploration, having been someone who's done extensive work with Kirkpatrick and slavishly followed the 4 levels, 5, depending on your viewpoint, the levels, the fact that there are other models that's definitely deserves some exploration and the importance of co-creating it.
Yes, yeah.
So you build the evaluation into the architecture of the intervention. That sounds really, really valuable. There's so much value in this. We really recommend you read Adjacent Learning. It's a really good book and it's really readable and accessible as well. David, thank you so much. You've been a really joyful person to bring on. You brought so much energy and passion, and I hope it's ignited the people that are watching this a passion to go back to the first principles of L&D and see how it can actually really guide your OD practice as well. So thank you so much. It's been a great session. If you've enjoyed this, we'd love it if you hit the like button. And we're still trying to grow the channel. The channel is growing really nicely at the moment. We're big in India now, Danny, and we're big in Germany. Who knew? But we'd love it if you subscribe. And also, if you're watching this, you think someone would really get some value from hearing David talk about learning and development and OD and AI and all those brilliant things that he's covered today, then please do feel to share it with them as well. We'd love that. But most of all, thank you so much, David. We know you're really busy. And we're recording this literally the last day before Christmas. So this will be going out sometime in January. Have a wonderful Christmas, David.
And Happy New Year, both. Thank you very much for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.